This video was sponsored by the Great Courses Plus. If you don't know what they are, it's a service for instant educational lectures by top professors. If you want to find out what inspired the topic for this video, then stay tuned till the end to find out more. The Crusades have a complex legacy, and opinions range from, those were pretty bad, to Deus Vult heretic. But if you have any general knowledge of Middle Age warfare and politics like yours truly, then you know the overall consensus on the black sheep of the bunch, the Fourth Crusade. It was bad. The Fourth Crusade was the blunder to end all blunders. Why? Because it was a crusade against other Christians, against the second capital of all of Christendom, the greatest city in the world at the time, Constantinople. The Fourth Crusade was like the asteroid that would come in and destroy everything. From this point on, the city would never reach its former glory, falling to the Ottomans just 2 centuries later. Since Crusader history is often lumped into Europeans just going off and fighting against Muslims, then coming back, the specific wars themselves aren't really known to the general public. Mentioning the Siege of Antioch wasn't something on the priority list for grade school, so let's go back to the start. During the Middle Ages, the 11th century specifically, a new fight was declared by Pope Urban II against the Muslims who centuries prior had invaded former Christian lands and established caliphates. This was the First Crusade, a pilgrimage/war to holy sites of Christendom which united knights and kings from across Western Europe under the cross. This war was pretty much a success, and Crusader kingdoms were established along the Mediterranean coast. However, Crusades II, Muslim Boogaloo, saw the Turks come back in force, and this crusade saw major defeats for the Christians, leading to the Christians coming back during the Third Crusade, which saw limited success and still traumatic failure. These 2 wars certainly never matched the first. Since Jerusalem was still under Muslim rule, a Fourth Crusade was needed. Keep in mind the span of time I just summarized in 3 sentences is very generalized and consisted of 100 years. By the turn of the 13th century, a new pope, Pope Innocent III, called for the armies of Europe to once again band together and take back the Holy Land. This new crusade, however, would go differently. Instead of invading down through Anatolia into Israel, like the past wars, this plan was to invade through Muslim-occupied Egypt. A plan like that, though, required boats. And if there was one place you would go in medieval Europe for your seafaring needs, it would be Venice. And so the Crusaders made a deal with Venice. In return for payment of 85,000 silver marks, Venice would build a fancy new fleet for the soldiers and knights to sail on. This included the medieval equivalent of D-Day boats. But there was a catch. The Crusaders didn't have that much money. So to alleviate their debt, the Venetians said that if the Crusaders captured the city of Zara, which was being contested between Venice and Hungary, then the city would lessen the debt for the Crusaders. Keep in mind the king of Hungary, King Emmerich, was Catholic, and so too was Zara. The crusading leaders agreed, hiding the plot from most of their army. And so the army got on their new fleet and sailed all the way to there. The Pope learned of the plot to capture Zara and threatened to excommunicate everybody involved. So the crusade was off to a great start. Learning that they would attack a Catholic city, some crusaders simply left. But even with smaller numbers, the attack continued. The Pope, outraged, excommunicated everybody involved, including Venice, but then took this back after learning that the crusade leaders never notified the army about the Pope's previous threats. So he simply excommunicated the Venetians. Despite all this, the crusade was still on, and the Crusaders were still in debt with the Venetians. It's by this time we talk about Byzantine politics. The Byzantine Empire had survived since the fall of Rome in the west, but troubles still happened, like losing most of their land to the Muslims. A current situation had been going on in Constantinople, and now it was about time to involve the Crusades. A Byzantine prince, Alexios, had been thrown in prison because of an earlier coup against his father, Isaac II, by Alexios III. I know, it's a lot of names. The prince promised the Crusaders via a letter that if they came and helped dispose of the traitorous Alexios III and brought himself to power, he'd repay them 200,000 marks, convince the Eastern Church to reunite with Rome, somehow, and aid in the new crusade. So the Crusaders did just that. Sailed to Constantinople, used their fancy new ships to attack the outer walls. The city which withstood against invasion was now under attack by fellow Christians on a holy crusade. Go figure. Alexios III terribly failed his own counterattack against the Crusaders, accidentally allowing a large portion of the city to be set on fire, and in this disgrace, he fled the city. The plot had worked, and Prince Alexios, along with his father Isaac, came back to power. The Crusaders set up fortifications outside the city, and relations were pretty good. For a while. After the former Prince Alexios couldn't come up with the funds he promised, the Crusaders grew restless. His father Isaac died, and soon he was left alone to face the armies. The Byzantines soon became so desperate they began melting holy relics to appease the Crusaders, whose welcome was now feeling like more of an occupation. Another Alexios, Alexios V, no relation, I know, disliked the situation now unfolding as the Crusaders became more agitated. He overthrew Prince Alexios and proceeded to build defenses, knowing the Crusaders would respond. And respond they did. Infuriated that they would not receive payment, the Christian army invaded a second time and absolutely destroyed the center of Christendom. The rift between the East and West exploded as the Latin Crusaders pillaged, burnt, and massacred an unknown but certainly large portion of the population. After 3 days of violence, the Crusaders took charge of the city themselves, declaring the Latin Empire. This empire would only last a few decades, but this initial destruction and occupation caused unprecedented damage. The Byzantines fled and founded their own empire, the Empire of Nicaea, on the outer rims of the Latins. Once the Byzantines did come back to power, they had to attempt to rebuild, but the occupation had already done too much. In the following centuries, the Muslim Turks continued to invade Anatolia and southern Europe, but by now the Byzantines were too weak to stop these attacks after those decades of living in diaspora. By 1453, the Ottomans finally invaded Constantinople, ending the Eastern Roman Empire that had existed for 1,500 years. And much of that was all thanks to the Fourth Crusaders, who in their goal for repaying a debt ended up contributing to the rise of the Ottomans in Eastern Europe and the death of the Byzantines. Good job, guys. Those Crusaders that actually did end up going to the Middle East universally failed and contributed very little. Today, the overall opinion on the Fourth Crusades is a collective sigh and a lot of embarrassment. This video was inspired by a lecture which was featured in an online video service called the Great Courses Plus. The lecture was History's Great Military Blunders and the Lessons They Teach, taught by Professor Greg Aldrete. In this course, he goes through numerous battle failures across history and the ramifications they cause. You can access this and many other interesting courses through the Great Courses Plus, a subscription on-demand video learning service with over 7,000 video lectures taught by professors in pretty much every field. And I mean every field. Science, math, history, lots of history, and even really specific and odd topics like photography or art. These courses are hosted by institutions like National Geographic, the Smithsonian, and many others. I know since college just started you don't want more homework, but there isn't any. There's no grades, you just watch and listen. So if you want to learn about more military blunders, click on this link to get 1 month of unlimited access to courses and videos absolutely free. Just visit thegreatcoursesplus.com/knowledge. The link is provided in the description below. This is Cody of Knowledge Hub.